Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Staffing Monthly as we focus on the state of staffing. And you really can't consider the state of staffing complete unless you are dialed into Staffing Hub's 2022 State of Staffing report that they put out. And really the annual report they put out every year is among the best that you're going to find. The insights that they glean from agencies of all different sizes are incredibly important, but it's actually actionable, which is what I love about it. So I really would be remiss if I did not invite, David and Krista from Staffing Hub to share this and what their perspective is on the state of staffing. And if you're not familiar with who they are, I have no idea where you've been living lately, but just to give a quick intro, David from Staffing Hub he's dubbed as a guru. I don't even know how many hats he actually wears in staffing. It's a bit admirable to me. He's obviously the president of Staffing Referrals, which is an amazing automated referral platform. If you're looking to increase your candidate flow, he is growing that successfully. But the hat he's going to be wearing today is the president for Staffing Hub. And Krista Garver is the managing editor for Staffing Hub. So I got to believe that she is the one that actually puts all of this actionable insight into motion to deliver to your inbox so you can actually have those insights to kind of guide your strategic plan. So grateful to have you here, David and Krista. And if you could just kind of walk me through really quickly, like how are you plugged into the staffing industry right now in your given roles?
Yeah, so I've been in the staffing for about 11 years now, always on the supplier side. Started doing work years ago with Text Us and started looking at like what are the questions I would want to know as a staffing owner in terms of understanding how fast growth agencies are moving, how slow growth agencies are moving. I went and looked at a lot of the reporting that was being done at the time and was just interested. It was like, all right, well, here's all the averages, and averages are great, but averages aren't how you're going to get to what's next or how to be better. And so when we started digging into doing these reports, I guess this might be our fifth or sixth one that we've released. We really kind of set out with the intention and the goal of identifying key trends and tactics that people are doing differently to give people a blueprint to grow their staffing agencies faster. And over the years, we've just evolved that and tried to make it go deeper and get more insights. And super excited to be here with you today.
Awesome. How about you, Krista?
Well, I was with David on that initial journey with Text Us and into the staffing world 6 years ago. I've been the managing editor at Staffing Hub for only about a year and a half now, but I've been involved in writing the report ever since the beginning. So this is an area that has been kind of core to our understanding and our growth for the past 6+ years.
So I love that. And one thing that what stood out to me, and as you get to know me, I'm hyper competitive. But I noticed that a lot of your reporting is actually split into slow growth and fast growth. And can you just kind of really quickly, like, has that always been the case, or did you just see an emerging trend as you started analyzing the data over the years that made sense to, hey, we see that this group of agencies is, growing at this clip or being impacted or having these insights, and we see that this group of agencies is doing it a little bit differently? Like, how did the splitting that come about?
Yeah, it was really when we were doing the first report, I was looking at like, all right, trying to understand, I was trying to learn more about staffing, how staffing agencies operate. And then looking at the data, I'm like, all right, well, looking at this and just coming back with just straight averages is going to help everybody get to average and say, here's what doesn't really give you a target to go after. I'm also hyper competitive. And I was like, I really want to know like how are agencies that are doing things that if the companies that are doubling year over year, what are they doing and how is that different than the ones that aren't? So that's just kind of a personal wanted to have that understanding. And then it turns out that a lot of other people in the industry did as well, because the report's been a pretty big success.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And on that vein right there, I was taken aback. Like, I thought 2021 was a great growth year, fueled a lot by recovery and the shift, but then to see 80% of your respondents are expecting double-digit growth this year, that's insane, right? Like that's crazy. But that's what they're seeing. But can you tell me, like, is there a sweet spot? Like, double-digit growth can mean 90% of things, right? So is there a sweet spot? Like, are they seeing like 10 to 20%? Do you see them like optimistic around 20 to 50%? Like, is there a sweet spot that this 80% of agencies think they're going to grow this year?
Yeah, so we had almost 60% of the respondents forecast their growth between about 11 and 50%. So that's a big chunk. About 1/3 of those were 11 to 20% range, and just a slightly smaller group was 21 to 50. So that is really the sweet spot, and it's huge. We had smaller groups expecting more than 50% and just a few expecting less than 10%. I think one of the things that was really interesting about this year's report is almost every single respondent expected growth of some sort. And it was only like 1.5% who didn't think that they would have a growth year. So the outlook is overwhelmingly positive. I also just wanted to mention, when you were talking about the fast growth and slow growth, that every year in the past, we've divided our fast growth and slow growth by agencies who grew less than 10%, agencies who grew more than 20%. And for this report, that was not a meaningful comparison. The growth was just so high that we actually had to lift our cap for fast growth up to 50% or more.
Wow,
because
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was too many agencies. That's
awesome. So one thing I always look at, and I'm hyper competitive, usually mostly against myself. I don't really, I fundamentally, I believe comparison is the thief of joy, right? So I don't really try to compare myself against other people, but I just want to be the best version of myself. And I think that reflects the companies. But if you think about this side of it, how much of that growth is organic just because the industry is growing? So that company that's like, hey, we're going to grow 11%, that's just because the industry is going to grow 11%. Or how much of that is kind of accelerated growth because they're actually growing beyond that? Has there a sense? I couldn't quite encapsulate that out of the data. Is there a sense that people are growing, they're picking up market share from other agencies, or is it just the market is expanding? Does that make sense with the question?
Yeah.
I'll talk briefly about the data, and then I'll let David jump into some of that. So I went back and I looked, at the past 3 years reports. And I think certainly a proportion of the very fast growth is because in 2021, there was certainly a large group, I think roughly 20% of agencies that reported no growth at all. So obviously there has been a large swing in the market toward that. But I'm not sure that entirely accounts for the 50 plus 100% growth that we're seeing. There's more to that story.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the entire market's expanding is a huge part of that. I think the Great Resignation is tying in. We've got demand for IT jobs that's not going away. We've got labor shortages in healthcare that there's no foreseeable end regardless of the economy. I don't think that the economy could be in a bad spot. We're still going to need more travel nurses. We're still going to need people working in healthcare. So there's some categories that I think are growing, and we just simply don't have those people in place, at least not with the models that we currently have right now. So. Yeah,
no, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of on that vein, when you said Great Resignation, that makes me think about just overall trends when it comes to recruitment and candidates. And one of the call outs that I noticed, and I think it's anecdotal or it's common sense to think this in a way, but like the number one reason that people are leaving one job for another was obviously higher pay, right? I think I was shocked by how much of a difference it was. I feel like the next 3 or 4 reasons that people were choosing to leave were like maybe would make up the higher pay piece of it. So from an insight standpoint, that's fascinating, but to make it actionable, how should our agency respond to that? Should they just really focus on going after jobs that pay more, or try to get their clients to pay more money and raise that pay rate so they can actually, keep the recruitment going? Or is there a way that they can actually still leverage or tie into those other reasons that people are leaving to still recruit those people, even if they might not be able to offer higher pay? Like, what is your thought around that?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because I think survey data, when you ask a candidate why they left a job or why they took a new job, people always say pay. I think this might be one of those moments where there's a discrepancy between what people say and what actually happened. There's a recent report out by SHRM, the Strategic Human Resource Management Organization, where they basically said that 90% of people who rate their company culture as poor have thought about leaving their job within the last few months. And 64% of that same group are actively looking for new jobs. So while pay might be what respondents say is why they're looking for a new job, I think culture is frequently at the core of why people leave. From a staffing agency perspective, I think it's key to actually start thinking a little bit more like marketers and segment your workforce and segment the talent workforce. I think everybody's like, oh, what's the silver bullet? Is it, do I need to pay more? Do I need more benefits? And really what it is that you have employees that work for you that value all of these things differently, and looking at your audience in segments. So you might have a group of, say, 20% of people, maybe all they care about is pay. Offer them the highest paying jobs, find a way to deliver the highest paying jobs to them. You're also going to have a group of people that their number one priority is flexibility. They want to work 2-3 days a week. They want to be able to work where they want, when they want, figure out how to get those jobs that offer flexibility to them. And then yet there's another group segment that I think is out there. And those are the ones that want growth potential, career opportunities. And they may not care about flexibility or pay. They're willing to take loss on those fronts because they just want to learn the most. They want to have the best career advancement. And I think if the staffing agencies as a whole could stop looking at like, what's the one thing to do, and start looking at like, of the people that we work with, what persona does this talent or this candidate fit in, and what job should I be delivering to them based off of that?
That's actually really interesting about segmenting your workforce that way, because a lot of times we just get so hung up on finding the best match candidate for whatever pay there is, and agencies aren't taking, to my experience, they're not really taking the time to really dig into why someone might be willing to take a job. So that's a really fascinating observation on that, to bring that in, because you might be able to get a better candidate that might have said, hey, I want $25 an hour, but maybe they would take a $23 an hour job for the right culture company, or this other piece of it. And maybe you can actually present them to a candidate and give your client, or present them to a client and give your client a lot better value of getting someone that might be, more experienced, more capable, have more skills. That's interesting. I really like that approach, David.
Yeah, and I think you could get better fit. One way that I think agencies could consider implementing something like this is if they were just asked, when you're onboarding a client, onboarding talent, like, of these 5 things, rate these 5 different attributes on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you start to have that segmentation of your population, and then you could actually deliver jobs based off of that. Maybe a little bit more advanced than a lot of agencies have the capacity for, but I think over time we'll see things moving in that direction.
Sure, absolutely. And that's one thing that I know technology will bleed in as we start to, the digital transformation has forced most agencies to optimize their onboarding flow and all that kind of stuff. And that's something that we're actually going to be getting into quite extensively in our July technology issue of Staffing Monthly. So I think that's astute. There's another piece of data in your report that I found professionally embarrassing, actually. And when we talk about the Great Resignation, when I hear that, I think a lot of those people just shifted, they left where they were at, they resigned, but someone went back in the marketplace for different reasons and whatnot. So there's a lot of activity. There's still a lot of hiring activity that's going on. But when I looked at this and I saw where people are finding their jobs, sure, job boards makes a ton of sense. That makes sense to me, right? And referrals is naturally a big one, right? It's not, what who that always pays, in there. But then I looked down there and I saw reached out to by a recruiter was 4%. And then I saw classified ads was 3%. And I was like, are you kidding me, staffing industry? We're only doing 1 percentage point better than a classified ad. I feel like we've got an amazing opportunity to grow here. Am I missing something, or do you see it that way too?
Oh, I think this is actually points to a huge opportunity for agencies and recruiters. So one thing that I've noticed in talking with staffing industry, staffing agency owners and recruiting managers within those agencies is we've heard over and over again that things have changed. We all know things have changed, right? The way people look for jobs have changed. The frequency with which they look for jobs have changed. Candidates are driving the market, and we're in a place where they kind of, just like with shopping, you expect everything in whatever channel that you want it all the time. But on the other hand, what we often hear is that recruiting processes haven't really kept pace with that change. And a lot of agencies are doing the same things that they've always done. And as a result, they're really experiencing diminishing returns from those efforts. So in the research, the top 3 places that people in our sample found their current job was referrals, online job boards, like you mentioned. This is predictable, and also social media networks. And I think there's a real opportunity for recruiters to leverage these sourcing tools more effectively by being a little bit more creative. For example, 20% of the people in our sample found their current job through a social media network. Recruiters can do a lot to be on those networks and reach out. I know of a travel nurse who gets 100% of his candidate, or travel nursing recruiter, who gets 100% of his candidates and placements from being a thought leader on Facebook. 100%, that's what he does. There's also a huge opportunity, I think, especially now, for recruiters to really become like career coaches, not just recruiters, not just put someone in one job, but help them throughout their entire career. Another example, I know of a recruiter who his goal is to always get the best jobs for his candidates, even if those jobs aren't with his company. And so if he has a candidate who's looking for a particular job and he doesn't have that specific job, he doesn't have the best one, he will actually refer them and say, hey, I think you should go over and work with this other company. But the result is when the person is looking for a new placement, they always come to him first. So it boosts his business in the long run. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to just be more creative, more consultative, and be better than a classified ad.
Yeah, I agree. And Krista, I think that is great insight. I was going to ask the question is based on what you saw, like what recommendations do you have? And I love that you just went there with that. There's something that I'm hearing out there as it relates to what you mentioned with social media being in the top 3 of finding people, which makes sense. I mean, it's in your face everywhere you go. So what about how many agencies do you think are leveraging, the old school e-commerce tactic of using Facebook pixels and Google pixels down to the job ads that they have on their website or their career portal? Meaning that if an agency has a manufacturing or light industrial job listed on their website, if they actually put the pixel down to that level where it will essentially follow that person that might have looked at the job on their website over to social media and maybe feed them a very, light industrial or manufacturing centric job ad in their feed or in different, if it's the Google pixel, different, advertising outlets there. Do you know of any agencies that are actually leveraging that type of social media recruitment or I guess job advertising? Is that a thing that's emerging in our industry at all?
Definitely a thing that's merging, and definitely a question that we'll be adding to next year's state of staffing. It's a great question. I don't know the data on it. I do know that Krista and I started working together as we launched a digital marketing agency, I guess 7.5 years ago. And we actually did that for some of the staffing agencies we worked for. So we had implemented, saw success with it. It's something I think every agency should be doing. I think retargeting is a unbelievably valuable marketing play, and going down to the job level and having those jobs follow you around the same way that the shoes that you looked at on Amazon do makes a lot of sense if you want people to apply for that job and it's a high value job. But I don't know in terms of the penetration of the market. I'm unsure.
I'm glad that
there's a thing in. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm glad that I put it in your camp because I know that y'all will actually go get the answer to it. So that's great.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think there's a trend, or there should be a trend, toward thinking of recruiting more, modern marketing. Marketing has changed so much over the past 10 years. And, the agencies, I think, that are doing a really good job and are going to continue to do a really good job are mirroring those trends with their recruiting. And there are some that have it really, really dialed in, and others that are still doing the same things that they did before we had all these new insights and tools into modern marketing. So going forward, I would like to see, or I think that those two things should merge a lot more.
Yeah, and to that point, we just came from, I was at Engage a couple of weeks ago, and one of their themes and things that they were talking about was, thinking like a marketer, making sure you have the marketer on your team. I think staffing has historically underspent on marketing. It's been a sales recruiting, it's like cold calls. We've got this old school methodology. I think the companies that you see winning, like look at Aya Healthcare and what they've done and what they have as a marketing platform. There's companies out there like Fusion Medical in the healthcare space that are doing just like massive marketing movements, and they have marketing teams and organizations. And then there's also still agencies out there that have 300 recruiters and they don't have a single full-time marketer on staff. And I think that that's going to continue to be a shift that comes with the digital transformation, is you need people to actually manage this and move yourself forward. But I think as more things shift to digitally, thinking more like a marketer can be pretty valuable in a lot of aspects.
I agree. I mean, marketing is so well integrated with society that it's hard to know if marketing is changing human behavior or if human behavior is just constantly influencing marketing. Like, it's just hard to tell where it starts and where it ends. But the bottom line is human behavior is designed now to adapt to how Amazon and Facebook and Instagram and all those places market to people to get them to take action. And that's all recruiting is it's just, you need to reach a specific audience with a specific message, and you need to encourage them to take the action you want them to take. So I agree with you 100% that agencies are falling behind if they're not incorporating an on-team marketer, or in-house marketer to lead some of that. So I think that's great. Speaking of the agencies that are kind of adopting those forward-thinking methodologies, I want to get into something we talked about earlier about fast growth versus slow growth agencies. And where I noticed the biggest difference is at least where it stood out to me when I was reading the 2022 State of Staffing report, is how they're looking at the challenges that lie ahead. It seems like just about all of the challenges that all of the agencies that were surveyed reported on, it seemed like the fast growth agencies generally weren't as concerned with the upcoming challenges that the slow growth agencies were. So, and if you're watching this and you're not quite following that, go look at the report and see this. But here's my question. Do you think that it's the mindset of the leaders of a fast growth agency that just says that's not as big of a challenge as we make it out to be, just because maybe they've got the more positive opportunistic mindset, and they don't, I guess, overvalue challenges, or they don't get as concerned with the challenges as much as maybe a more conservative mindset leadership team might be, that might lead to more slow conservative growth? Like, do you think it's a mindset thing there, or do you think it's that because the challenges aren't as pressing to some agencies that they can actually grow faster, and their growth is really reflective of how big the impact of the challenge actually is for them? Like, where do you think that falls?
That's an excellent question. And I like your hypothesis on maybe it's just a mindset. That could be it. My thought behind this, it's just my perspective, so I don't know if this is the reality, but I think when I look at that, what I see is, the top challenges for slow growth firms is getting candidates to respond and finding qualified candidates. And I think that that's maybe a different maturity level of a staffing agency. And so if you're a fast growth agency, you've figured out how to get candidates to respond, and you've figured out how to get qualified talent. And you're now thinking about the harder, deeper things that are tied to the candidate experience. So now you're thinking about redeployment and onboarding, and you're digging deeper. And so I think it's more of just kind of the stage, what they're trying to solve and what they're tackling right now is different than what the slow growth agencies are trying to solve.
Interesting. And Krista, because you're the one that digs deep into the data, do you think there's anything in the data that might, indicate one way or the other with this?
Yeah, so honestly, one of the things that I found really interesting in this particular result is that the difference between the challenges in fast growth and slow growth, they were actually considerably smaller than they have been in years past. In years past, we saw much larger differentials, and this is, even after we changed the groups to get more meaningful results. So I think that all agencies are really working to bump up these things, but also the slow growth agencies they're getting to about the same level as fast growth. And I also think that's probably, these are the same challenges that we have identified as the top challenges ever since we started doing the report. So they're not new things that are coming up. They're things that the agencies are continuing to work on and continuing to try to improve. So I would guess that it is, like David mentioned, everyone's getting better, and some companies have just figured it out, perhaps because they've been in the game longer.
And to that, I also think it's like things are hard when you're trying to fix them. They're not hard if it's something you're not trying to fix. And it's like when I talk to like the fast growth agencies, they're focused on onboarding and credentialing and like these components. And I think they're looking at the talent experience end to end. So I think maybe that's bubbles it up because it's something that's top of mind for them and that they're actually actively trying to solve.
I think that makes a ton of sense. That's actually pretty good perspective on that. And to shift to a very pointed question about the data, and kind of the last piece I have as we talk about the report is 80% of your respondents are incredibly optimistic for growth. They're looking at this and they're saying, hey, we believe we're going to grow better than double digits, right? Yet if you turn on the television or you look at social media or you read any news outlet, it seems like the impending recession is all but evident. It seems like maybe like the media might almost will it into existence, right? So how do you balance that? Like, what if you look at the optimism that your contributors are showing against a pending recession, based on your holistic view of the industry or the insights that you have, what advice would you give to the agency owners and executives to kind of help guide them over the next 12 to 18 months?
Mm-hmm. So we've actually asked a form of this question in our survey every single year. And over the past couple of years, a lot of the answers have focused on be resilient, be adaptive. There are going to be ups and downs. You need to be able to weather the storms. This is an industry that will succeed, but there will be challenges. But there is one piece of advice that has come out every single year, regardless of everything else, and that's actually to be smart about your technology. That means really being strategic about tools that will optimize your processes and give your recruiters the time to go and build and nurture those relationships that they really need in order to survive even in a downturn like we talked about earlier. Technology isn't a silver bullet, no matter how much we want it to be, and a lot of people do want it to be. But I think if deployed thoughtfully, it can really help during these times, and we'll be able to help staffing agencies weather any coming storms because it will help them really make their processes better and their recruiters more creative and more able to do some of the human-to-human recruiting work that needs to be done.
I agree with that. I wholeheartedly, and it shows that you're really in tune with it. David, what are your thoughts about it from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little bit generic, but I think a critical thing anyways, is just, figuring out how to be indispensable to your clients by providing solutions that your competitors can't. I think in downturns, you're going to see job orders potentially dry up. You're going to see certain segments get hit harder than others. And the clients that have those relationships where they're solving bigger problems for their clients those are the ones that are going to have ways to solve, keep making money, keep paying their candidates, or keep paying their recruiters and their team. So I think it's really just focused on being indispensable, focus on the kind of the core components of your business. And actually, Dan, I think you and I talked briefly at the beginning of this call, and I'd like to turn this question on you because I think you might have the best experience and best answer to this specific question.
You're right, and I do. I have the blessing of living through the recession of 08, 09 and how it hit the staffing industry. And I was recently asked by a staffing professional, how did that time impact the company? And I'm always incredibly transparent, and I explained that initially it was crushing us. We tried to hunker down and lean down and weather the storm and, preserve cash. And we tried to do all those things, and it was absolutely destroying us. And I received some amazing advice from a mentor of ours that just said, you have to be, opportunistic and smart and thoughtful, but you cannot go against who you are as a company when we were built for growth. So with that mindset, I responded to this staffing professional and said, the agencies that look for the opportunity amidst the chaos are the ones that are going to succeed, and they are going to thrive, because despite any chaos or downturn situation, there are always companies, clients, and opportunities that are thriving because of it. And then there's the ones that are going to get crushed. And that's just the nature of it. And that's not good or bad. It's just is or isn't. But how you respond to that as an agency is what really matters. And, I explained to this person, who was actually asking because she was laid off from her employer in 2009. And I explained how lucky she was, because had she stayed there, she might not have found the opportunity that she did coming out of the recession with a better employer that has actually launch padded way more successful growth for her. In addition to that, how lucky was the company that she latched on with for being available, because she was laid off. And I said, if you take a step back, I know it's personal, I know it's raw, and you have nervousness about a recession because of how it impacted you personally. But if you just take a step back and you apply the journey that you went through to all of the other candidates that are out there that might go on the same exact journey as you to our industry, and think about how many really talented people are going to be laid off during a recession. And if we can position ourselves with an open mind to go out and receive those talented people and upgrade the quality of our database and build relationships with those people, some of which might have not considered working with an agency prior, but now they might be more open to working with an agency, and we can upgrade the talent of our database, and we can be the one that's in the position to put them on assignment or put them onto a contract or place them with a client that's not only helping that candidate improve their trajectory coming out of the recession, but it's helping that company, add talent, and it's going to help them grow. And we can be actually part of the recovery. And if we go into it with that mindset and we look for the opportunities to grow, then we can benefit. And that was really that's what I learned about living through the recession and how you need to approach it is be thoughtful, be prudent with what you have, but look for the opportunity and make the most of it. And I think the agencies will be just fine.
I think that's the best advice on that, on how to handle this moving forward. I think looking at it from the lens of an opportunity side, I appreciate that insight.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you asked, for sure. And so I want to pay some homage, because I'm a podcast listener. I've got the commute like a lot of us do. And one of my favorite go-tos is the staffing show that you put on, yet one of these other hats that you wear. I don't even know. I think Krista told me you haven't slept in 9 years. So, which is amazing.
Roughly, yeah.
But the staffing show is great, and you go out and you reach out to all of these executives that have amazing amounts of experiences and different perspective, and you get their insights and you share that with the staffing community. And if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with the staffing show, just go check it out. Like, put it in your earbuds, and it's a great resource. But you asked these two questions that I just love. And I'm going to turn them on to you to kind of pay homage to the show. Is that one of the questions you always ask is, what is the best piece of advice that you wish you were given when you're starting out on your staffing journey? So my question to you is, what is the best answer to that question that you think that you've heard that would be of value to the viewers of this interview right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to summarize it probably poorly, but the best I can. It was, and I'm drawing a blank on the person's name who was on the podcast, but he spoke intensely about the importance of being adaptable, and how that is actually one of the top criteria for success in your career and for your business as well. That's something that resonates with me. I think there's stats to back that up. I also think if you look at where the world is going with things changing faster than they ever have, it's probably the key skill that we need to be flexible, adaptable, be willing to adjust, so that we can move forward and kind of work with what the world is giving us at any day or point in time. So
I love that. I absolutely love that. And the last question that I'll share, and just because I'm a reader as well, I love absorbing content and learning. What is the best book or learning resource that you would recommend to a staffing owner or executive to help them upskill and be prepared for the next, the next part of their journey?
Yeah, the two books, I'm going to go with two books here. And the number one required reading for everybody on our team is a book, Influence. It's The Psychology of Persuasion by Chidalny. It is, I think it's foundational reading for business or not, just life, understanding why we are influenced and what influences us and the kind of the core components to that, I think is super valuable for just going through everyday life. It's a really fun read. He also has some follow-up books on that. And then the second one for anybody that's looking to get start a business, the Bible, the Lean Startup, that has been great in terms of how to get a new product or business off the ground. Those are two kind of foundational books for a lot of things that we've worked on over the years.
Love it. Love it. Krista, I'm going to open that question to you as well. What is the best book or learning resource that you would recommend to the viewers here?
Sure. So I'm going to actually follow David's footsteps of influence. I think that anything by behavioral economists is probably like the best thing you can read for business. So anything by Dan Ariely on behavioral economics, it really explains a lot of our human behavior, and in any sort of marketing or recruiting where you actually are trying to influence someone's behavior in some way, I think this is essential. And then I also just want to give a shout out to the new book about women in staffing put out by SAA. A great collection of stories about some really about some really awesome women in staffing. I think it's good reading for everyone in the industry.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you're watching this and you're not an avid reader, those sound like, 4 great resources that could be the beginning of an amazing, executive library. So I love it. I'm grateful for your time here today. Are there any parting shots or shout outs that you want to provide to our audience, or maybe tell them if they don't have access to that report, how do they go get access to the 2022 Staffing Hub State of Staffing Report?
Yeah, you can go to staffinghub.com. It's in our resource section. Also Staffing Show. If you just Google Staffing Show, you'll end up on the site. Would love to have all of you check that out. And more importantly, Dan, really appreciate being on here, being a guest with you and having this conversation. Some excellent questions today, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. Glad to have you here.
One more thing, we will be hosting a webinar on June 30th, really digging into a lot more of the results from State of Staffing as well, if anyone is interested in some follow-up.
I think they should jump on. I just got the email today, and I'm going to be jumping on that because I want to dig into it, because that's how you learn what we should, like what actions we should take and how we should steer, our companies as we try to navigate the next 12 to 18 months. So definitely we'll get the link out to that to make sure people can register, and we'll get the links out to the podcast as well as the report. So Krista and David, thank you so much for your time here today. I am grateful for it. I look forward to growing together, and I hope you both have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.